Hello and welcome to Mulch, with me, your host Rebecca Anning-Brown. This is a weekly podcast for flower farmers who want to build a confident flower farming practice that reflects the lifestyle that you want now and in the future. Each week I'll share conversation and tips to nurture and grow you and your flower farm. I'll open conversations that flower farmers find difficult to talk about, provide approaches that will help you to make decisions, chuckle at the idiosyncrasies of our work, and always be real and honest about my own work as a flower farmer. My goal is to help you to grow a curious, confident and grounded flower farming practice that flourishes as a business that you love and are proud to shout about. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and if you like what you hear, please do leave a review and share the podcast with your flower farming friends. It really does help to grow a confident and successful flower farming community. Good morning everyone and welcome back to Mulch. So those of you who listen all the time will know that I wasn't here last week. It was an unplanned break, but it was bank holiday weekend. It was my son's birthday and I just really enjoyed that family time and didn't want to stick my head into something that I love, but by definition is work. Thank you for listening again today. I really hope that you enjoy today's episode. Now, to give you some context, I am recording today's episode on a Saturday, so the Saturday before it goes out, and that's to allow Anthony more time than normal to edit. He is currently out and about doing children, I was going to say chauffeuring duties, but they've actually gone to activities that are Headingley based today, so he is walking around Headingley, protecting my children from the drunken people who start doing the Otley Run at godforsakenly early hours. If you haven't heard of it, the Otley Run is a pub crawl. When I was a student, it had about 13 pubs in it. Now it has about 20. It starts at one end of the Otley Road, which is the main road that runs through Headingley, where we live, and all the way into the centre of town. Now, that is one long road, and that is a lot of pubs. It's now somewhere between 20 and 30, I think, and sadly, it's become a bit of a destination thing to do. So, whilst Anthony is doing that, children duty, I have had a glorious, muddy, mucky, stinky morning, making compost, with used bulbs and separating out bulblets so that they get scattered around our garden and eventually will produce beautiful flowers around the garden. Using the last of last year's nettle feed, which was utterly disgusting. And a lovely customer has just come to pick up a bucket of flowers. So in anticipation of that, I came inside. I finished a second bag of compost, all kind of filling and layering it up. Just before I came inside, I gave my hands a really good scrub and decided that I was going to sit down and fulfill Anthony's challenge and also put hand cream on because my hands get a lot of scrubbing and they've been quite sore and dry this week. So if you can hear that kind of slippery sound in the background, it's because I am choosing to occupy my hands with hand cream whilst I record because, heaven forbid, I get creamy fingers all over my work laptop. Okay, so that's, a random introduction as ever, and I think sometimes some of you guys just love listening to the random idiosyncrasies of the way we think and plan in the Silver Grey household as much as you're interested in our flower farm business. Today's episode is being recorded early because I am accepting a small challenge from my husband. The challenge is to produce an episode without scripting and planning. Now, when I say scripting, I never write an episode word for word, and when Anthony sits down and looks at them with me, we're not planning out every word, but what we do is produce like a spider diagram or a thought map or whatever you want to call it, so that I know where I start, the things I want to cover, and where I'm going to finish, and the things that I must remember to say, because I can be quite forgetful these days. And having those things listed, I find really helpful. But today's episode is really triggered by a number of discussions that I've had with flower farmers whilst mentoring them over the past couple of weeks, and also triggered by my husband, Anthony, who is regularly saying that I underestimate the skills that I bring to the party of flower farming through my experience in other jobs and other worlds. So what does that mean, and why is that relevant? We think it's relevant because how you turn up as a flower farmer, how you turn up for yourself in your business, how you turn up for yourself as you advertise and market, whether that's through doing a presentation, how you speak to florists or customers when you meet them, whether it's on Zoom, whether it is on Instagram or in a newsletter, and most importantly, how you turn up for you makes a difference to your level of success. So I really want to unpack that a little bit. I may waffle, and that's just my nature. Hopefully by the end I'll have reached some conclusions and they will be helpful. I'd love to know your feedback on this episode and what you think of it. So I'm going to start by that concept of how you turn up for you in your business. Because for me, that's about the transition from your business being something that you dreamed about, something that you thought was fun, you bought a few books on, something that you had a little faff or play with in an allotment or part of your garden or at a local market just as a one-off. And that transition from there to I want or need my love, passion and hobby to be more than that. I need it to earn an income. And at the same time, I want to continue earning that income or grow that income doing something that I absolutely love. And the reason that's important to me is because as I look around the flower farming world, I see a lot of people like me. So I'm going to describe my background in a way that I know that some of you are aware of, but others of you won't be. So I went to primary school. I went to a grammar school, a state grammar school in Birmingham, because that's where I grew up. I went to university, and at university I studied medicine and also medical ethics, so I got a couple of degrees in those things. I followed a pretty traditional route as a junior doctor, going through junior doctor years, middle grade, middle registrar grades, and up to consultant. And for doctors, that means lots of more training along the way, and that means lots of exams as well. And lots of things that you use to build your portfolio, to demonstrate your experience, knowledge, and expertise. Sometimes that is courses, sometimes that is presentations, sometimes that's work towards publications. Sometimes it's just more hours doing the job so that you have more confidence and skill, and therefore capability and more trust, and are more trustworthy for your patients. And ultimately, those are the people that you serve as a clinician. And I use that word serve deliberately. If I don't conclude and talk about that in this episode, I encourage you all to bring me back to the topic of service through business again, because my mindset and approach to that as a business owner is very different to my mindset and approach to that as an emergency medicine consultant. And I suspect that is also another sticking place for many people who are entering the land of flower farming. So the reason I give that description is because it's a career of service. It's a career that required practice and learning and experience, always aiming to get stuff right, but in reality, sometimes getting stuff wrong and needing to learn from that pretty quickly so that the risk of harm to your patients was as low as is humanly possible. Again, I hear yourself asking, why is that relevant? Well, that career, along with my kind of associated careers in medical law, working with doctors in difficulty, mentoring and coaching doctors in difficulty, and also working for one of the big regulators, making decisions around medical challenges and practice, have given me and my children and my husband, by the way that we have fashioned our lives, the things that we have to work with. And they're things that I don't share or show on social media. I do think that's relevant to the growth of my business. So here's the question: why am I not showing our life? Well, partly because it's private, and frankly, my private life is my private life, and it's one of the few things, the time and space in your home when you have challenging, high-profile careers, that remains yours. Those four walls, the gate at the end of the drive, those are the things that remain your space. And so I'm really, really precious about it, because for a long time, reaching that driveway was the only place where I felt safe, where I could truly just take off all the layers and the decoration of uniforms or roles and just be me. Like, inevitably, who I am and how I am has been part of all of the jobs that I've done. But equally, how I am now is conditioned in part from the experiences that I have had and the worlds that I have engaged with, the stakeholders that I've worked with. Again, I hear you saying, well, who cares? And so I'm going to float the concept that the reason that I don't share my home is because it's a nice house in a nice area, and because I feel guilty that I have the space, or we had the space, to dig up parts or all of gardens to be able to start our growing business. Now, you have to keep that in context. Like, we're not talking acres, we're talking like percentages of an acre, like, and small percentages, but we still are fortunate enough to have two gardens, one at the front, one at the back, and those two gardens have different climates because of which way north and south is, and don't ask me which way that is because I still don't know. And enough space to put our tiny tunnel, and that is our only tiny tunnel, and enough space to be able to plant and test and trial some of our initial crops. And, you know, that's enormous. And I put that in the context of one of the things that I commonly say, both on social media, in my newsletters, in my writing, is that what we don't have is a farm, a barn, a tractor, spare tools, all of those things, like really developed and sturdy kind of perennial gardens, all of those things that would have made it easier, we've had to fight for, we've had to find, we've had to buy, we've had to earn. None of it has been handed to us on the plate. And it sometimes makes me chuckle, and I chuckle openly when I have conversations with flower farmers about the rent that they pay for the spaces that they use. Because the rent that we pay in Leeds is pretty close to the same amount of rent that students pay weekly for accommodation. So any of you who are close to university life will know roughly what that might be in a major city in the UK. Any of you with children at university will know that that's no small bother, and we pay that every week, year in, year out, and we have had to pay that from the beginning of our business. So again, I guess what I'm saying is that the things that we don't have always framed how I've presented what we look like as a business. But the things that we do have inevitably supported us. And I've always kept the two incredibly separate. And maybe that's because I have felt an element of shame for the things that I do have, without remembering on a daily basis what it has taken to have those things. The 20-hour working days, the getting up at 5 and coming home at 9, the having other people pick and collect and feed my kids and not seeing them, the coming home so exhausted that when I do see them, I can't converse or engage with them. I could continue, but I guess I don't see those two together. I see one as the things that we have and that we're very lucky to have, and I see how that's perceived by other people as being affluent or fortunate or gifted, and that really isn't the world that we sit in. Why is that relevant? It's relevant because one of the things that I see and hear from professionals, and I'm going to label professionals here and parents specifically, but I think there's elements of it in the other people that I work with. It's relevant because as a professional, it is a weird transition where people's observations are freely offered about the distinction between being a flower farmer, a dirty manual job, and being a professional in a uniform or a suit or with a capital letter job. It's relevant because people's perceptions from those worlds are often in or around our mind, and they prevent us from wholeheartedly sharing what we know, what we love, how we are, what we're doing, and why that's successful. And so one of the shifts that I am determined to make over the coming weeks and months, and to be fair, I think that what I provide, the content that I give on social media, in our newsletter, in our speaking on YouTube, wherever, is honest. And I don't say I think it's honest, I know it's honest, because that's the person that I am, that's how I've been trained, and that for me is important so that growth is visible. It hasn't just happened, and it doesn't just happen. And I think that growth process is one of the things that people like watching in what we do. The other reason it's important is because one of the experiences that professionals often have when they're transitioning or thinking about transitioning from an obvious career, where it's obvious how you're going to make money, where it's obvious how you will be perceived positively or negatively by society, to a job and a business where you shape it and you have the power to make those choices, and more importantly, you have the power to design how it looks, and you will become more visible in a role that is distinctly less glamorous and less well renowned. Making that transition is difficult because people's perceptions are set in our mind, but also we find ourselves with a thought process that says, I can't make money doing that. It won't be successful because this won't work for me because I will be criticised for doing this, because this will fail, because all those negatives, there's a whole basket full of negatives. I've heard them all, I've felt them all, I still feel them all, and I've still heard them all. And it's hard to make that transition from good girl or good boy who puts in the work, does the preparation, and polishes to the nth degree before they share anything, to being a business owner where having a plan is helpful, but knowing that you are able and willing to be flexible in that plan, so long as your goal and your intentions remain true, is key. And being confident in your decision to grow a business that is, less than glamorous, but more important than less than glamorous, less than well known. It's certainly not a job that people would have ever described or offered to me at school. You get the grades that I got, you go and do a serious or sensible capital letter job. In fact, that's just how it was. Certainly nobody would have recommended or suggested horticulture. And the minute I started growing flowers, if I could have £1 for every person who told me that I was never going to earn anything by selling flowers, I'd probably be closer to being a millionaire than I am now. But that's not true. And so how I show up and what I share, I think, will change over the next few days, weeks, months, so that it is more visible about the challenges of making that transition and the benefits, the things that have worked for us and that haven't worked for us. I guess what I'm wanting to do is to open up that conversation, because I think there are some small business owners, whether they're florists or other businesses listening here, as well as flower farmers. But for me, the key thing is not that you are there, that you've succeeded. The key thing is that you are working towards it, and that you understand what that involves and what that looks like, and that somebody in the industry is openly discussing the impact of that when your background isn't from owning your own farming business that is diversified. I always like to offer some caveats when I do a podcast. The caveat here is that I have very deliberately in this episode talked to a particular audience. That doesn't mean that I'm not interested in everyone else. It doesn't mean that this podcast isn't for everyone else. What it does mean is that space where people talk about the work that we do and how they talk about that work that we do as flower farmers might become more open, might become more diverse in the conversation. And I'm using the diversity word there specifically about the breadth and depth of conversation that we have around what I would still suggest as a professional practice. Okay, and that's an evidence of my previous work. You'll notice there are some phrases that just roll off the tongue. What I would still suggest is a very legal inclination. Another phrase that I love is "out of an abundance of caution." It's a wonderful catch-all, but it's also honest, and it shares that awareness that actually I work with nature, and so everything could go wrong at every minute. And that's okay, there will always be flowers or foliage, and if there aren't, frankly, no one will die. I've talked about this before, but that's the sense of perspective that I come from. Okay, a rambly episode. I'm going to listen back to it now. There may or may not be some additions that are shared with you after this part. I am curious to know what it sounds like for myself. I'm also curious to know how you feel about episodes that are an open, rambly discussion rather than an episode with an intention and a clear purpose of discussion and a clear sharing of advice and guidance. I would love to know your feedback, not because I plan to change who I am, but because, as I was saying to a florist earlier this week, I really want everything that we offer to be helpful and of benefit and of service. Useful service. Because whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, or a flower farmer, you are still serving people. Thank you for listening. If you like the way that I think and are struggling with any elements of your small business, drop me a message or go onto our website and book a mentoring session. I can help. If you are in that transition phase from being a professional to a professional, you see how easy it is to slip into that tone. But in a career that you want to leave or transition from towards being a part-time or a full-time flower farmer, then we do have a course that is, I just looked to my right, it is leaving the whiteboard and coming to fruition. It will start in September officially, and it will run until August. I love the accountability that I'm giving myself by putting this out here on our podcast. The course is coming. It is going to happen, and I will tell you more about it as the days and weeks go on. Listen on, join in, share your thoughts. I hope this episode of Mulch has given you some food for thought, and I look forward to seeing you, hearing you, talking with you next week. Until then, have a great week. Rebecca.
Thank you for listening to Mulch. I hope that you found it useful. To find the show notes, head back to our website where you'll find links to all the things that I've been talking about in today's episode. If you're on Instagram, you can find us at Silver Grey Foliage. I would appreciate it so much if you were able to share this episode in your Instagram stories. And if you are able to leave a review, it really will help more people to get on and grow. I'll be back with you next Monday to talk about more flower farming in practice. Rebecca.